Hello friends, welcome. Friends, we are all fed up with spams, right? And these spams are, such a big nuisance that, people have started leaving calls which are not there in their directory list. So whatever calls that you are receiving, which you have stored, the names which you have stored in your database, those calls you take and rest of the calls you just simply discard because you suspect that these are going to be coming from spammers because spammers have become a nuisance in India. Now, friends, this issue of spams is kind of going on for such a long period of time that TRAI and the government is struggling very hard to resolve this problem. We are all aware of that. And one of the way the government wants to resolve this problem is to display the name of the calling party in the display. And this recommendation TRAI came out with long back in the month of February. So if you look at this document which the TRAI came out with, I'll just show you the document. Let me just go to the front page of this document. Just a minute, give me a second. Yeah. So this is the document, recommendation of introduction of calling name presentation service in Indian Telecom network, 23rd February 2024, right? And this they did because the government gave them a reference to figure out a technical way of resolving this issue, because display of number, which is called CLI, right, calling line identification number, does not give us the context to the receiver of the phone call to make a judgment whether to pick up the call or not. And they believe that if you make a presentation of calling name, that would give enough context to decide whether it is coming from a spammer or not, and the spammers will be discouraged to continue to call them because their name is going to get published. That is the whole idea about this recommendation. Now, when this recommendation came, at that time I have done some videos and articles to say that this concept will not resonate and will not deliver the purpose. It will not solve the purpose because of some fundamental problems which we are not resolving. And that was that authentication of calls. And I'll explain in this video. I just kept quiet and I did not take up this issue because I felt that, I have said enough and there is no point in me to continue to keep on harping on this issue. So I just kept silent. But suddenly, in just a couple of days back, I went into the TRAI website and I saw this recommendation, right, of TRAI. I'll show you. If you go to the TRAI website, let's do it right in front of you. So if I go to the TRAI's website, so trai.gov, and then you'll see that TRAI released recommendation of revision of national numbering plan. Now, initially I thought that this might be just a routine recommendation, right? Numbering plan, what it has to do with spamming or what it has to do with CNAP or the calling name presentations. I ignored it. But later, because any recommendation that TRAI comes out with, my interest always is there to go through each and every word of the recommendation. I find some time and I'll go through the recommendation. So when I was going through this recommendation, this is the page, right? This is the page. Let me just do a little bit of zoom out. So this page, the page number 30, what is the page? Let me just show you the page number. Page number 27, right, came into light in my reading, and I find it very, very interesting. What is TRAI saying? This is clause number 2.38, and you should read this clause. This is very interesting. What TRAI is saying: the current network interface between the TSP relies on the assumption of trust grounded in commercial agreement rather than rigorous technology-based security measure. Right? You probably have not understood it, but I'll just read out and then I'll explain. This means technology-based, this trust, commercial agreement rather than technology-based security measure. This assumes trust coupled with the proliferation of new interface such as SIP, non-TSP entities, third-party SMS gateways, and open 5G architecture creates significant security gaps. These gaps can be manipulated for malicious activities including CLI spoofing, IMSI theft, unauthorized surveillance, posing serious challenges not only to the integrity of the communication but also safety of sensitive user information. The potential of AI enhanced threat such as voice cloning combined with CLI manipulation further complicates the landscape, stressing the urgency of a robust countermeasure. And now comes the important part, and I'll change my color of my pen because this is very, very important. It says, therefore, the authority is of the opinion. Let me just zoom also a little bit so that you understand. Therefore, let me just zoom out a little bit. Yeah. Therefore, the authority is of the opinion that transition towards a more secure and trusted framework, drawing on successful models from internet security such as X.509 based public key infrastructure PKI framework, or the adoption of ITU standards, specifically the Q.3054/2020 and so and so, which proposes a robust certificate-based, this is important, certificate-based authentication system to mitigate signaling abuse. Now, friends, this is exactly what I have been saying for such a long period of time. That's why I am doing this video. This is important, which proposes a robust certificate-based authentication system to mitigate signaling abuse. And let me start explaining from now on. Or 6 minutes have passed, but this is important to understand. See, what has happened is, I actually did an article, but before that, let me just give you an architecture of the overall system. Now, if you look at this diagram has a originating service provider, a terminating service provider, right? And then there is a national long distance operator, and then there is an international long distance operator. This is a typical structure of a telephone network, right? You agree with me? Now what happens is that if a call originates, let me just take my pen, if a call originates from here, it can either go from here and go out into international, or there could be another path that the call originates and it goes from the national long distance operator and then to the termination service provider, and then to the final party to whom that the call is intended. Correct or not? Now what will happen is that in the TRAI's recommendation of calling name presentation, which kind of will replace the CLI, what will happen, instead of terminating or instead of displaying the CLI, which is the telephone number, the intent is to display the number of the caller. Caller means the caller has a SIM. The caller has taken the SIM through a KYC mechanism. When you give the KYC, you do Aadhaar authentication. Aadhaar has got a name. So you will display the name of the individual which is there in his Aadhaar database on which the KYC has been done. So that is the intent here. You got it? Right? So you don't display the CLI, display the name of the individual who is calling. Now the problem here is the following. There are huge problems with this method of displaying name without having this concept which TRAI has now listed out, which I showed you right in front of you, which says that what? That in order to implement and in order to make the system, mitigate the signaling abuse, what you need to do, you have to have a mechanism which is saying that the public key infrastructure PI framework and a national certificate authority or multiple CA can achieve higher signaling security from telecom infrastructure. I don't think that you have understood this. Let me explain what TRAI is saying. TRAI is basically saying that any entity which is calling, let's say there is a call which originates from here, right? What you do, what this originating service providers do, it simply packages the CLI information of this caller, right? And then transmits the signal, that information through the signaling path to the terminating service provider, who takes the CLI and then displays that information to the calling party, right? The call party hands it. Now the problem here is that if, let's say, if you don't trust the originating service provider, you don't trust him, right? And let's say there is an IPPX switch here, which is having the capability to change the CLI information. Let's assume that. And a changed CLI information is fed into the originating service provider. Two things can happen. The originating service provider is not trustworthy. Why it is not trustworthy? Because it may be a internet service provider or an IP PABX switch which is terminating to a large service provider like Bharti, Vodafone, etc. Right? So it does not mean that all call has to originate from the big service provider like Bharti, Vodafone, etc. It can originate from either it can come from international gateway, or there are various other service providers who are offering PABX services, right? So if a call originates from a PABX service provider and it lands to the originating service provider, which is the big telecom operator, then the call which has entered into this switch, the telecom operator will treat that CLI as authentic. He is not going to tamper with the CLI, and it will consider the service provider or the PABX exchange provider who is creating the call, generating the call, also as a trustworthy entity. He is not going to question the authenticity of the CLI and the intent of that PABX exchange and say that whatever you give me, I will consider that as authentic. So the information that is coming from here outside and entering into a service provider like Bharti, Vodafone, Idea, whoever it is, and then it transmits from here and then enters the terminating service provider. The terminating service provider will say that whatever CLI has been shown in the path of this call, I'll take it and I'll display and into the name of in the mobile phone. So the problem is that let's say if he does a calling name presentation, let's say if he does that, right? And if the CLI is wrong, whatever is being entered here, right, by this entity, right, which is pushing it into the big service provider, if the CLI is wrong, the name is wrong, then what will happen? This name, the display here, what the display in this side of the mobile handset is going to be either wrong or misleading or not available, right? Because somebody has spoofed the CLI, right? That is one problem. Second is that our KYC system is not foolproof. There are really multiple phones with forged identities. So if you are going to basically have a display of calling name here and somebody has forged the CLI or forged the documents when they do the KYC, then somebody else's name is going to get displayed, who doesn't really know that he has a number in the name of that other person. Like what happens in case of bank account. See, you know that how bank account frauds are taking place today. See, when somebody is trying to defraud a particular person using all kinds of electronic means, money is extracted. The money is not being put in the account of the fraudster. He is going to hire an account of anybody who is not a fraudster, who may be an innocuous individual. He might not be aware that his account is being used for frauding or channelizing those funds, or he might have given his account on rent. So he is completely oblivious to the fact that his account is being misused. No thief is going to use his own identity and own account. So therefore what will happen is the same situation will happen here. The KYC will be misused. KYC is going to be wrong, and therefore and then the originating service provider, which can be a PABX exchange whose authenticity cannot be verified. Sometimes the calls will come from international exchanges here where you have no jurisdiction, so you cannot verify the authenticity also, the who is delivering the call. So on what basis you are going to display this calling name presentation here when you can't even verify? You can't have your KYC system is not foolproof. Then what is going to get displayed? That is why what TRAI is saying now becomes extremely important. And I'm very happy that TRAI for the first time has mentioned this in their recommendation, though it is almost like a passing reference, but they have captured this in the final recommendation. If you look at the final recommendation, because just below this, if you look at what they are saying, this is what? CLI authentication framework. Important. CLI. What does CLI authentication framework means? Now let's talk about it. So basically what TRAI is saying is that entities which originate the calls. Entity means either the big service provider or the small service provider like the PABX exchanges, etc. The originator of the call has to be trusted entity. So how would the originator of the call will be a trusted entity? You know Vodafone is a trusted entity. You know Airtel is a trusted entity. You know Reliance is a trusted entity. But if there is some PABX exchange provider who is connected to the originating service provider or the big service provider, his trustness cannot be verified unless you have a system of distributing certain tokens to this entity, and they have to confirm or comply that they will be acting in good faith. You understand what I'm trying to say? This is absolutely important. There has to be, because there could be multiple small entities spread all over the country which can generate calls, right? So their intent has to be verified, and there has to be a token distribution system which will identify those entities, because without those entities getting identified, it makes no sense. Second, this is one. Second, that entity which is generating the call will have to not only verify the CLI. CLI has to be verified. CLI means calling party. The party which is called, he has to be verified, and not only it has to be verified, his verification identity has to be stamped like what you do in case of an internet call. So what does it mean? As soon as the identity is extracted, it has to be stamped by the entity which has been assigned a token. So there has to be an entity which has been assigned a token. He has to sign it, and he has to encrypt it in a header, that identity of the individual who is making the call, and that should get transmitted into this system, both the information, the entity which is originating the call and the caller whose identity has been encrypted and put as a header as the signaling path of the call. And once that information gets transmitted throughout the network end to end and reaches the terminating provider, then it doesn't have to do any database query. It simply has to decrypt that information using his own private key, and both the information, the originating service provider, the small entities, code, token which has been assigned to him, that can be extracted, as well as the caller's identity will get extracted, and that will get displayed in the handset, in the end of the handset. That will make the system foolproof, because just displaying the calling name information makes no sense at all, because of the loopholes which I mentioned in just a couple of minutes back. So that is going to make the system foolproof. Otherwise, displaying calling name is going to create such a big confusion because of a porous and imperfect system where so many numbers are floating around. So if fraudster or somebody who wants to cause some kind of he wants to defraud a particular person, he can adopt various mechanisms. We have already seen in the banking sector, all the accounts are being misused. All the Jan Dhan account was misused at the time when demonetization took place. Right? So there is no way you can prevent such kind of misuse by displaying calling name. It is not going to happen. It is also going to make all your effort of international call mitigation very, very useful. What you can do is, you can have a arrangement with a international gateway provider or a service provider who is handing over call to you in the international international gateway. Because it is not possible to have a trusted arrangement with each and every service provider throughout the world who is handing over call to our international gateway. It is not possible, but you can incrementally start building trust relationship. How will you do that? The same thing which you will expect, which you are doing locally here, right? For all the calling entity, right? By assigning a system of distribution of token to identify those entities which are generating the call. Same principle we will follow for the international entities, that they have to verify the call before handing over those call into the international gateway. Once that is done, then you can exclude those trunk lines which are coming from trusted entities, because their caller is verified as well as the entity is verified, and focus all your attention on those lines where neither the caller is verified nor the entity is verified. You understand? That is how you can build the trust incrementally into the system. Because without trust, implementing any of this requirement, calling name presentation or whatever we are trying to do is a half-hearted effort. It is going to create a huge problem going forward because of the reasons which I have mentioned to you. And that is why I got excited, extremely excited, because I have been talking about this, the US system, because US is not implementing this CNAP, etc., by not creating a foundation of network which is trustworthy, because trust is very, very important. Unless you trust each other, whatever name that you display, it makes no sense. The other thing is that whenever you are doing database query, let me tell you friends, whenever you are doing database query actually adds lot of latency into the system. So it is better to rely on signaling path, the information which can be carried on the signaling path, which can be encapsulated at the time of call origination. Let's not do database query all over the place. It creates lot of security issues. Data can be misused. Service providers are not having trust with each other from the point of sharing business information. So they will not cooperate. But they will definitely cooperate in handing over calls to each other in a trustworthy manner. You got my point? The other thing which is important in this whole initiative is that when you are building a system like that, which is trustworthy, then what happens is that then slowly, you will be able to create a system which will not only ensure that the spammers are going to get excluded out of the system, then all your service will keep the authenticity of all your services which gets delivered through a telephone network, their robustness is also going to increase. Because today, if somebody is calling and you cannot trust his identity, right? His name can come, right? But you don't know whether that guy is actually the person who is calling or not, because that name has not been authenticated by anybody. You understand the problem that we are facing today. So that is what we want to do. All other international markets, for example, US, if you go to Europe or somewhere else, they are implementing features like that, right? They are not going into database query. For example, mitigating, robocalls which are originating from international gateway cannot be solved by database query with who are the roamers, right? That cannot be solved, because if you are going to create a database here of roamers, outbound roamers, so as to understand that the CLI spoofing is happening to call which are inbound India or not, that is not going to solve the problem, because this database of outbound roamers cannot be maintained in a real-time manner. You cannot do that. There will be real calls which are going to get blocked. So that's what I wanted to say, friends. And if you are interested to basically go a little bit of detail in deep dive, I will encourage you to read my article which I just wrote, right, on this particular issue, and you will understand that each and every aspect has been discussed and covered, right? Why CNAP without a robust trusted framework is ineffective, how to implement a trusted framework and its purpose, key requirement of implementing a trusted system, how trusted system can help in dealing with spoof international calls, and conclusion. So friends, you can basically go and read this article. I'll paste a link of this article in the description. I hope that you have understood what the problems are and how to deal with spoofing and spamming, and what is the foolproof and incremental way which can scale, rather than doing things in a haphazard manner which does not scale, create confusion, does not solve the problem. So you have to have a structured approach. That is what I intend to say, and that's what we should do, and I'm very happy TRAI has recognized this for the first time. Thank you friends for your time. I'll come back with a new video next time on a different topic. Thank you very much.